Welcome to the future, where all our dreams become a reality, but so do all our nightmares. We've seen an incredible upheaval from every level of society, whether it's in our personal characteristics that have come to the surface and the trauma we've had to deal with, or within our relationships with our loved ones, or in a societal manner, and even to a socio-economic process. We are seeing a collapse of everyday life as we knew it. We are also seeing that many people want to go back to some level of normality. And that idea of normality is what I want us to think about. Because remember that normal, the thing that we're craving, had many of us at the brink of exhaustion, had many of us anxious all the time, chasing the elusive goal of more. And also we must remember that the case in point of normal is just a story that we have been told about ourselves by families, societies, and educational systems that have been handed down to us to make us think that this is normal. Running from pillar to post in anxiousness, trying to achieve this ideology of success. And we all know now that that really wasn't something we could ever arrive at. And what we have to do is rethink the story, rethink our perspective, so that we can come into this new world with a new dynamic perspective that gives us an opportunity to not only survive, but thrive. And we must also realize is that we are in a huge cycle as humanity. There's a great book from the 1990s called The Fourth Turning. And what they do in the book is they explain that humanity goes through 4 stages: a spring, a summer, an autumn, and a winter. And the last time we went through something like this was back in World War II. And at the end of World War II, we had the birth or the spring of the International Monetary Fund, the United Nations, and a whole lot of other structures that got society to build to where it is now. But unfortunately, we are in a winter again, and we are seeing the death of old structures, old ideas, and old ways of doing things. It's almost as if the younger generation is squeezing the older generation out. And if you just think about it, if you are living at home with multiple generations inside the home, there would always be friction between the way the older people wanted to do things and the way the younger people wanted to do things. And so here we are at the end of an 80-year cycle. And they say that the cycle will only really end by 2026 to 2028. So we still have another good 5 or 6 years of this winter to get through. And this is important because what we have to do is get a broad perspective of where we are. And if we are in a winter, the best thing we can do is dress warmly. And so what does it mean to dress warmly? It means that we must be okay with transformation. We must be okay with change. We must be okay of letting go of our stories. And if we just think about transformation, it always has 3 stages. It has the goodbye stage, where you have to let go of what you were familiar with, what you were used to, even if that story was kind of abusive, but you still have to say goodbye to it. And that always is sad or angry that you have to let go of any familiarity. The second part of a transformation is no man's land, where nothing looks familiar, everything is new, you feel exhausted because you have to keep reconnecting different parts of your brain to make sense of things. And then the third phase of a transformation is when you find your new groove, your new momentum, your new rituals and behaviors to start building towards this new world. We are squarely in no man's land. Everything is unfamiliar. Nothing is like it used to be. And so we have to realize that resilience becomes an incredibly important part of how we go through transformations. And resilience isn't something about doing what you always did, but just pushing through it. But we need to be resilient in responding, recovering, and reimagining. They're all very different types of resilience. And I think the worst thing we could do was be strong and resilient in trying to hold the whole old world together while this new world was being birthed. And so we must realize that the skill sets that we required to thrive in this old world are not the same as the skill sets we need in this new world, in this new multi-dynamic, multifaceted quantum world that we are moving into. You see, the old world we come from was very much the story of the Industrial Revolution. And the Industrial Revolution was all about efficiency, productivity, and the ability to create profitability for our shareholders. But today, as we move into this new dynamic world, this linear world is gone. The need for efficiency is secondary to being robust. You see, there's this idea around complicated worlds and complex ones. And the world we come from is a complicated one, meaning that there were intricate patterns that could and were repeated. In a complex world, you have intricate patterns that are not repeated. And so you could utilize mathematics and automation to get yourself out of a pattern process called the complicated world. But now we move into this complex world, you can't use the same tools to preempt and predict what the future could look like. And so if you can't preempt and predict what the future will look like, the only thing you can do is manage your behavior. And so what does our behavior have to be? And what do we have to do to show up into this new world in a new dynamic way? Well, the first thing we have to do is heal our memories, heal our past, and stop any expectations of what the future could look like. You see, they've recently proven that 50% of our memories are false. And this is a science-based study that they had. And it's not so much that we have to figure out which memories of ours are false or not, but we have to realize that the memories that make us sad, angry, and resentful are just creating more patterns and expectations and projections into the future. And so the irony is the best way to prepare for the future is to heal your past. And when you get to heal your past, you almost start on a clean base, almost like you've really starting to see the world afresh. The second thing we need to do is we need to become adaptable, agile, flexible, forever learners, optimistic, all in one go. Meaning that when we lose our expectations of what the future must look like based on our pasts, and we start making decisions with our curiosity, our excitement, and our humanness, we naturally become adaptable, flexible, and optimistic into this new world. And so it's not about throwing away everything you knew from the past. It's much more about engaging with it in a new way in this new world. You see, all death and destruction always have a rebirth. They always have a new awakening that starts to happen. And the rebirth that we are going to start seeing over the next 6 to 8 years is very similar to the Italian Renaissance. You see, back in the 14th century, they had something called the Black Death. And the Black Death devastated most of Europe. And because of that devastation, it ended their feudalism markets, which is their capitalism of the day. It ended that. It saw an acceleration of new technological know-how that was spread amongst the people. It showed us that you could teach more people about more technical things in agriculture and all sorts of different things, which then raised the middle class, and we started to see a brand new system come into play. But we also started to see the rise of the Italian Renaissance, post the death of Black Death. And in this new Italian Renaissance, what we did was we celebrated beauty, knowledge, and art for the very first time. And where we are today is the death of the old world. And the old world wanted us all to fit in to a machine, a production line, a corporate ladder that was designed by the Industrial Revolution. And as we start to see that demise, the new Renaissance will be about us, human beings, awakening, celebrating our uniqueness, our authenticity, and the way we bring impact to the world. And we must realize that for the longest time, our options of what we were able to do were limited to our exposure of what we thought was available. I mean, think about it. If you grew up in a family where your mother was a teacher and your father was a doctor, or your uncle was an accountant and your auntie was a director of a company, you would only think about those certain careers to think about. Or you could have had your friend whose parents were another 1 or 2 careers, but in fact, none of us are really exposed to that many career options. And when we did finish school, we were all given the same options of what to go and study at university. But you see, what's happened now is that the world we live in is a surplus society. In other words, we have a surplus of fantastic engineers, a surplus of fantastic accountants, a surplus of amazing doctors. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with any of these things, but we must also realize when something becomes a surplus, it just means that now you're commoditized, meaning that the price that you charge for your services or products is now going to be negotiable because there's 1,000 people behind you waiting to do that job for you. And so really we must realize that this new renaissance is the awakening of our uniqueness and our authenticity. The world we live in right now doesn't need us to fit into any machine. It in fact asks us to be the machine. And the only way we can be the machine is by making sure that we are awakening what's inside us. I think it was Mark Twain who said, the two most important days of your life are when you're born and when you find out why. And our task in this renaissance is to find out why. You need to be asking yourself, who am I? What am I here for? How do I combine my skill sets and what comes naturally to me? How do I combine my curiosity and my excitement and make it a business? Make it a way that I could add impact into the world. And of course, we live in the age of the internet. You can access 5 billion people around the world. All you have to do is get 0.00001% of them to pay you $1 a month, and you'll be living large. So understand, the world that we're moving into right now is not so much a complicated one, it's a complex one. The world we're moving into doesn't want us to fit into the machine, it wants us to become our own machine. The world we're moving into is not going to be stable or linear. It's going to be dynamic, multifaceted, and will need you to unlearn and relearn on a continuous basis. And if we adopt this mindset of anti-fragility, and this concept of fragility and anti-fragility is quite a simple one, comes from a New York Times bestseller called Anti-Fragile. What the concept is that if you're fragile and you drop, you break, you shatter. But if you're anti-fragile and you drop, you get stronger. So in other words, when we realize we're in winter, in other words, the cycle that we're in as humanity, when we realize we're in a transformation, when we realize we're leaving the old world and moving into a new world, we adopt a mindset that says, I'm anti-fragile. I'm ready for these challenges. I'm ready to unlearn, to relearn. I'm ready to bring my own curiosity and authenticity into this new world. And the question that most people ask me is, what sector will be really good so I can go and work in that sector? Or what should I study that's going to be popular in the future? And both those questions have got pure intention, but are fundamentally wrong. And the reason they're wrong is that you're predetermining the world to tell you how you will be successful rather than you telling the world how you will add success to it. So as we move into this new renaissance, this rebirth, this spring, ask yourself a couple questions. Am I here to make maximum impact on the world? Am I here to follow what makes me most excited so I can bring that skill to the world? Or am I going to just hold on to my old stories? Am I going to hold on to old expectations, old pains, old bitterness, and then get upset with the world when it gives me what I've always expected it to give me? So we always have to start off with inner healing, then move into outer expansion. And if you can't combine these two, you'll find yourself highly accomplished, but never really reaching purpose. And this new world we're moving into is begging us to achieve inner wisdom so that we can bring it out into the world in the most dynamic, positive, and optimistic way. Ciao.